They made Selka Ashrow taste the king's death with the whole dragon court watching. The first dish was silver pheasant, glazed in blood honey, set upon a plate so polished that Selka could see her own face bent in its shine, pale, smoke, stained, too thin from kitchen hunger, with dark hair braided under a servant's ash cloth and a mouth everyone in Blackspire feared more than knives. Ash-tongued, that was what they called her. Not witch in public, not yet. Witch required proof, and proof required law. Ash-tongued was safer, dirtier, a name that made nobles pull their sleeves away when she carried wine. A name that made cooks hand her the burnt pans, the spoiled meat, the jars no one else dared open. If poison touched the kitchen, Selka was ordered to taste it first. If she lived, the food was served. If she sickened, the nobles called it useful warning. Tonight, they had given her a feast. The hall of coals stretched before her in red gold splendor, its pillars carved into coiling dragons, its ceiling lost in smoke and candlelight. Nobles filled the long tables in jeweled silks and black velvet, their cups untouched, their eyes bright with the cruel relief of people watching another throat risk what theirs would not. At the high table sat Dragon King Raethan Blackspire. He wore no crown. The crown of Blackspire was fire, and everyone knew it lived in the blood. He sat in dark armor under a mantle of scaled black hide, his face stern and beautiful, in the way cliffs were beautiful before storms broke against them. His eyes were molten amber, but colder than flame should be. Behind his throne, his dragon shadow curled against the wall, enormous, horned, winged, and dim. Too dim, Selka noticed, because the kitchens had taught her to notice dying heat. A good coal glowed from the center. A sick coal shone only at the edges. The king's dragon shadow shone at the edges. High cupbearer Lord Soren Volk stood beside the royal table with a golden tasting rod in one hand, and triumph carefully hidden in his smile. He was a narrow man dressed in wine-dark velvet, his silver beard forked and oiled, his fingers heavy with signet rings from old houses that had survived too many kings. "Proceed," he said. Selka looked at the pheasant. The accusation still rang in the hall, though no one had repeated it since she was dragged from the lower kitchen. 3 nobles had collapsed before the feast began, black foam on their lips, their oath rings cracked down the middle. Lord Soren had pointed to Selka before the bodies cooled. The ash-tongued girl handles every dish. That was all it took. No one asked why a servant would poison minor nobles before the Dragon King arrived. No one asked how she would gain from murdering men who had never learned her name. A cursed tongue was evidence enough for people who wanted the answer to stand lower than they did. Selka lifted the pheasant with trembling fingers. "Eat," Lord Soren said. The nobles leaned forward. Selka put the meat on her tongue. Flavor struck first. Honey, smoke, salt, then the hidden thing underneath. Not poison, in the common sense. No bitter root, no nightshade, no powdered glass. This tasted like a promise broken inside blood. Like a man swearing loyalty while imagining a blade. Like old ink, mixed with dragon ash. Her tongue burned black. A few ladies gasped. Lord Soren smiled. "You see? The curse reveals itself." Selka swallowed. Pain moved down her throat in a slow line, but it did not kill her. It never did. That was the horror of her gift. She survived what entered her mouth, but survival was not immunity from pain. Poison still burned. Lies still cut. Blood still left memories. She tasted the second dish. Roasted marrow with saffron. Underneath it, fear sealed under an oath. The third, black figs soaked in wine. Underneath, ambition wearing mourning clothes. The fourth, river eel wrapped in silver leaf. Underneath, a woman's voice praying the king would drink before dawn. Selka's knees weakened. The hall blurred. Dragon King Raethan had not moved, but his eyes had narrowed, and his attention was no longer on the dishes. It was on her face. That frightened her more than Soren's smile. Powerful men could kill with disbelief. Kings could kill with curiosity. "Enough," Raethan said. One word. The hall froze. Lord Soren bowed smoothly. "Majesty, with respect, the poisoner must taste the whole feast. If she fails at any dish, we know where guilt sits. If she dies, guilt becomes convenient." The words were quiet. They cut. Selka looked up before she could stop herself. The Dragon King was watching Lord Soren now. For the first time, the cupbearer's smile thinned. "Majesty," Soren said. "3 loyal nobles foam in the physician's chamber. A cursed servant stands alive before poisoned plates. The court deserves certainty." Raethan's hand rested beside the royal cup. The cup was silver-black, dragon-shaped, filled with red wine dark as heartblood. Selka had not touched it yet. No servant had. It had been poured by Lord Soren himself. Behind the throne, the dragon shadow lifted its head. Not toward Raethan, toward the cup. Then it recoiled. A low rumble moved through the wall. The nobles went silent. Raethan's eyes sharpened. Lord Soren's fingers tightened around the tasting rod. Selka tasted the air. That was not something she usually dared do. Air carried too much. Breath, fear, perfume, hunger, old resentment. But the royal cup was breathing a taste into the hall, so foul and sacred it coated her teeth. Oath poison, not meant to kill quickly, meant to bind fire while it died. Her gaze snapped to the king's dragon shadow. Its wings trembled against the wall. The poison was not for nobles. The nobles had been rehearsal. Selka stepped toward the royal cup. Guards moved at once. Lord Soren snapped, "Seize her." Raethan lifted one hand. The guards stopped. Selka could feel every eye in the hall as she reached for the cup. Her fingers shook, but not from fear now, from recognition. The taste beneath the wine was old, older than Soren, older than this feast. It carried the same ash-bitter thread that had lived under her tongue since childhood, the same reason her mother had once slapped her hand away from temple wine and whispered, "Never taste a lord's oath unless you are ready to hear what his blood has buried." Selka touched the cup. Black fire raced up her veins. She nearly dropped it. The dragon shadow roared. The sound slammed every noble back in their chairs. Raethan stood. Flame sparked along his fingers, then guttered out as if drowned. Selka saw his face change. Not weakness. Horror. He had expected betrayal, perhaps. Kings always did. He had not expected his own dragon to refuse him. The dragon shadow pulled away from the wall, enormous and smoke-black, its eyes burning like cracked gold. It lowered its head past the throne, past the king, past the nobles, until its muzzle hovered above Selka's shaking hand. Lord Soren whispered, "Impossible." Selka's palm opened beneath the royal cup. A drop of poisoned wine slid over her skin. The dragon shadow breathed once. Then, before the whole court, it ate the poison from her hand. Raethan stared at her, as if she had become more dangerous than the cup, the feast, and every noble house in the hall. Selka's ash-dark tongue burned silver, and in the poison's taste, she heard a buried oath speak from inside the Dragon King's blood. His fire was promised before he was born. The dragon shadow did not return to the wall. It stayed bowed over Selka's hand, its vast smoke-black muzzle hovering inches above her palm, while the poisoned wine vanished from her skin in threads of dark fire. The Hall of Coals had seen executions, marriages, blood duels, coronations, and dragon rites old enough to make priests weep, but it had never seen the royal dragon eat from a servant's hand. Selka could not move. The poison had entered her veins with the taste of a buried oath, and now it crawled behind her teeth like silver insects. His fire was promised before he was born. The words would not leave her mouth. They clung to her tongue, hot and ancient, as if speaking them aloud would open something no court could close again. Dragon King Raethan came down from the high table slowly. No one stood in his way. His dragon shadow lifted its head only enough to watch him. Not obedient, not defiant, wary. That single hesitation changed the room. Nobles saw it. Guards saw it. Lord Soren Valk saw it most clearly of all. And Selka watched his face rebuild itself into outrage before fear could make him careless. "Majesty," Soren said sharply, "step away from her." Raethan did not look at him. "Explain why my dragon refused my cup. The girl has bewitched it." A murmur rushed through the court like sparks over dry oil. Selka's stomach clenched. There it was, the answer they would prefer. Not poison hidden in noble hands, not treason close enough to pour royal wine. A cursed servant, an ash-tongued kitchen witch. A girl whose mouth had always made them uncomfortable enough to blame. Soren pointed the golden tasting rod at her. You all saw it. His Majesty's dragon, Shadow, would not touch the royal cup. yet it fed from her skin. No ordinary poison taster commands royal fire. I commanded nothing, Selka said. Her voice came out hoarse. The dragon shadow rumbled. Every candle in the hall leaned toward her. Soren's eyes sharpened. Hear it? The beast answers her. Raethan stopped beside Selka, close enough that heat moved from his body into the cold left by poison. He smelled of smoke, iron, and something fading beneath both a fire starved too long behind locked doors. He looked down at her hand. The skin was blistered where the wine had touched, but the blisters were not red. They were silver, shaped like small broken rings. Raethan saw them. So did Soren. The cupbearer's face tightened for a heartbeat before he hid it. Selka noticed. Kitchens taught her to notice the moment a man regretted what his face had confessed. Raethan reached for her wrist. The dragon shadow snapped its jaws between them. The hall exploded in gasps. Raethan froze. Not from fear, from offense so deep it looked almost like grief. His own dragon had warned him away from her. Selka felt the creature's breath over her knuckles. It was not protecting her from the king exactly. It was protecting the poison still moving through her blood from being pulled back into him. She understood that without knowing how. "Do not touch my wrist," she whispered. Raethan's eyes lowered to hers. The entire court watched a servant forbid a king. Selka should have dropped to her knees, should have apologized, should have begged for the sentence to be quick. Instead, she held his gaze because the taste in her mouth was growing clearer. "Not unless you want the oath to return to your fire." Raethan's expression changed. Soren stepped forward. "She speaks riddles to frighten you. That is what witches do when steel comes near." Raethan's voice cut through him. "Did I ask you?" Soren went still. The king finally turned his head. A small movement, a lethal one. "I asked why my dragon refused my cup." The high cupbearer bowed. "Because the servant poisoned the feast and used her curse to draw the dragon's sickness into herself so she might appear innocent." Selka almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was beautiful in its cruelty. He had built a lie that praised her suffering as proof of guilt. The dragon shadow lowered its head again, closer to her palm. Selka felt the poison tremble. It wanted the king. It wanted his dragon. It had only paused inside her because her ash-dark tongue had recognized its shape. Raethan looked back at her. "What did you taste?" The question was quiet, dangerous. If she told the truth, Soren would call it witchcraft. If she lied, the poison would keep moving toward the king. If she stayed silent, the court would make her silence into confession. Selka lifted her blistered hand. "I tasted an oath." The nobles recoiled as if she had spoken plague. Raethan did not. "What oath?" Her tongue burned. Blood filled her mouth, bitter and smoky. The words inside the poison fought not to be formed. Oath poisons were made to hide beneath loyalty. Speaking them broke their skin. Selka forced the sentence out. "Before your birth, someone promised your dragonfire to another house." The hall of coals went silent. Raethan's face became unreadable. But behind him, the dragon shadow screamed. Flames burst from every brazier. Red banners caught fire and turned black without burning away. 3 nobles at the left table collapsed from their seats, clutching oath rings that had cracked open around their fingers. Soren shouted, "Lies!" Selka turned toward the fallen nobles. The taste in her mouth changed with each broken ring. One tasted of iron doors, one of a cradle kept under ash, one of a dragon egg that had never hatched. Her knees weakened. Raethan caught her before she struck the floor. This time, the dragon shadow did not stop him. His arm came around her waist, firm and hot, and every noble in the hall saw the Dragon King hold the accused servant upright while his own dragon curled its burning neck around them both. Soren's voice shook with fury. "Majesty, release her. She has infected your fire." Raethan looked at the silver ring blisters on Selka's hand, then at the cupbearer. "No," he said. "She has shown me where it was infected." The dragon shadow opened its mouth over the royal cup. It did not breathe flame. It exhaled ash. Inside the ash, an image formed. A woman in labor, a newborn prince, and a blood-red cup held above the cradle by a hand wearing Soren's signet ring. Selka felt Raethan go still beside her. The cupbearer whispered, "That is not possible." The dragon shadow's golden eyes fixed on him. Then, the royal cup split open. Hidden beneath its silver lining was a second cup made of black bone, and it was still beating like a heart. The black bone cup beat inside the broken silver, like a small, buried heart. No one in the Hall of Coals breathed. Even the flames seemed to lean away from it. Selka stood in the circle of Dragon King Raethan's arm, her knees still weak, her blistered hand burning with silver ring marks. His dragon shadow curved around them both, vast and smoke-black, its golden eyes fixed on the cup as if it had found an old enemy hiding in plain sight. Lord Soren Volk recovered first. That frightened Selka more than his silence had. "Majesty," he said, voice strained but steady. "Step away from that thing. It may be another working of hers." Selka almost laughed again, but the sound died before it reached her throat. The poison still lived under her tongue, and the black bone cup was changing its taste. Before, the oath poison had tasted like betrayal hidden in blood. Now it tasted like milk gone sour in a royal cradle. Raethan released her slowly, not pushing her away, giving her the space to stand on her own. His eyes did not leave the cup. "You poured from it." Soren bowed. "I poured from the royal cup entrusted to my office by 3 generations of Blackspire kings. And beneath that cup," Raethan said, "was bone. Old relics are built into royal vessels. You know this. I know relics do not beat." The dragon shadow lowered its muzzle toward the broken silver. The black bone cup pulsed harder. A thin red line opened along its rim, like a mouth deciding whether to speak. Selka tasted blood that was not hers. A woman's fear, a newborn's first breath, a dragon crying without sound. She took one step toward the cup. Raethan caught her wrist lightly before she touched it. This time, the dragon shadow did not snap at him, but it watched the contact with predatory focus. "Tell me before you risk your hand again," he said. The words were not soft. They were worse, controlled, precise, and edged with a fear he refused to name. Selka looked at his fingers around her wrist. The king's touch was hot enough to make the silver blisters ache, yet beneath his skin, she could feel something fading, not weakness, but fire being held underwater. "If I only smell it, I get pieces," she said. "If I touch it, I hear the oath. And if you taste it?" The hall went colder. Selka did not answer quickly enough. Raethan's hand tightened. No, a servant refusing a king was dangerous. A king refusing a servant's sacrifice was almost unheard of. Lord Soren seized the moment. "You see how she tempts disobedience even in you. Ash, tongue witches survive poison because they move it into stronger blood. Let her taste, and she will carry your dragonfire in her mouth." Selka turned on him. "Is that what you told the queen when you held the cup over her child?" The words came out before she could stop them. The hall erupted. Raethan went still beside her. The 3 nobles who had collapsed earlier were dragged upright by guards, their cracked oath rings smoking. One of them, Lady Vera Solm, began to weep black ash from the corners of her eyes. Soren's expression did not change, but the gold rod in his hand trembled once. Raethan saw it. "Answer her," the king said. Soren bowed his head. His Majesty was a newborn when Queen Maelira died. Many stood near the cradle. Grief confuses servants' visions. Selka tasted the lie across the room. It struck her tongue like burnt copper. "Not grief," she whispered. "A bargain." Raethan's dragon shadow rumbled. Selka pulled gently against Raethan's hold. He did not release her at first. His gaze lowered to her face, searching for deceit, fear, perhaps madness. She let him look. All her life, nobles had looked at her and seen a curse convenient enough to use. The king looked as if he feared what he would owe her if she was telling the truth. Finally, he let go. Selka touched the black bone cup. The hall of coals vanished. She stood in a nursery made of obsidian and pale silk. A storm beat against the windows. A newborn cried in a cradle carved with dragon wings. Queen Maelira lay pale against blood-soaked sheets, one trembling hand reaching toward her son. Lord Soren stood beside the cradle, younger, smoother-faced, holding the black bone cup. Around him stood 7 nobles wearing oath rings. In the corner of the room, a dragon egg rested in a brazier of blue flame. It was cracked, not hatched, wounded. Soren dipped 2 fingers into the cup and touched the newborn prince's lips. "By blood owed and fire promised," he whispered. "The prince shall keep the crown, but the dragon shall feed the houses." the queen screamed. Not from childbirth, from understanding. The vision snapped. Selka came back to the hall with a cry trapped in her chest. Her hand was stuck to the cup. Black veins of oath poison crawled from the bone into her wrist. Raethan seized the cup with his bare hand. The dragon shadow roared. For one breath, king, servant, and dragon were bound by the same poisoned heartbeat. Then Raethan tore the cup away from Selka's palm. Black fire burst between them. He staggered back, jaw clenched, but did not drop it. "Your mother knew," Selka gasped. The hall fell silent again. Raethan's face had gone white beneath the firelight. "What else?" Selka tried to breathe around the taste of the oath. "The poison was not made to kill you," her voice shook. "It was made to keep you alive while your dragon fed them." The 7 nobles at the tables began to stand. Too quickly, Raethan's dragon shadow swung its head toward them. Soren lifted his golden tasting rod and struck it once against the floor. Every oath ring in the hall flared red. The nobles froze, then turned as one toward Selka. Their mouths opened, not with their own voices, with the voice of the oath inside the cup. "Burn the ash, tongue before she names the egg." Raethan stepped in front of her, but behind them, from the dead brazier in the high alcove, came a crack. Selka turned. Above the king's throne, hidden among old dragon bones and ceremonial ash, an ancient black egg split open. And something inside whispered her name. The whisper from the black egg slid through the hall of coals like smoke under a locked door. "Selka." Every flame went blue. The nobles who had risen under the oath ring command stopped halfway from their seats, faces pale, mouths still open around words that were not theirs. "Burn the ash tongue." The command hung unfinished in the air, trembling like a blade too frightened to fall. Dragon King Raethan stood before Selka, with the black bone cup gripped in one hand. His dragon shadow coiled around his shoulders in a shape too large for the hall. Its wings scraped the pillars. Its claws smoked against the stone floor. Yet when the egg whispered again, the dragon shadow flinched. Not from threat, from memory. Selka looked toward the high alcove above the throne. For years, she had scrubbed ash from the lower halls and carried coal baskets past that alcove without once lifting her eyes. Servants were taught not to look at royal relics. Looking could be called ambition. Wondering could be called theft. Now the ancient egg sat split among dragon bones and ceremonial ash, black as burned glass, veined with a dull red glow. A thin crack ran down its center, and from inside came a breath older than the feast, older than the cup, older than the lie Lord Soren had worn so smoothly. Raethan's voice was low. What did it say? Selka's throat tightened. She did not want to answer in front of Soren. She did not want to give the court another piece of truth to twist around her neck. But the oath poison still burned under her tongue, and silence tasted suddenly like surrender. "My name." The hall shuddered. Soren's golden tasting rod struck the floor again. "Kill her." The oath rings flared. The 7 nobles moved. Raethan turned. He did not shout. He did not need to. His fury entered the hall before his voice did, and every guard along the wall lowered a spear toward the nobles. "No one touch her." The words should have carried dragonfire. Instead, sparks guttered weakly around his fingers and died. The nobles saw it. So did Soren. For the first time, Selka understood the true cruelty of the poison. It had not only stolen Raethan's fire, it had taught the court to measure the exact moments when his power failed. Lord Soren smiled. "Majesty, your command lacks flame." Raethan's dragon shadow snarled, but its body flickered at the edges. The black bone cup beat harder in Raethan's hand. With each pulse, the oath rings on the 7 nobles glowed brighter. Power traveled from the cup to them, and from them toward the dying fire behind the king. Selka tasted the path. Cup, ring, blood, house, dragon. A theft made ceremonial. Not poison slipped into wine, but a feast designed as a throat. Every noble dish had carried a small oath. Every cup had opened a channel. The king's dragonfire had been served back to the old houses course by course, while the court praised tradition. She stepped from behind Raethan. His arm moved at once, blocking her without touching. "Stay behind me." The command was instinct, not arrogance. "Still, it's stung." Selka looked up at him. "That is where they want me." His eyes cut to hers. For one dangerous breath, heat moved between them. Anger, fear, refusal, and something sharper neither of them had earned yet. Then Raethan lowered his arm, not because he was weak, because he understood. Selka walked forward with her burned hand open. The dragon shadow watched her, its great head lowered slightly, not bowing this time, but waiting. The egg in the alcove pulsed red. Soren laughed softly. You think a kitchen curse can command royal bone? No, Selka said. I think royal bone is tired of your voice. The first noble lunged. Lady Vera Solm, black ash still leaking from her eyes, raised a jeweled knife and drove it toward Selka's throat. Selka did not run. She caught Vera's wrist with her blistered hand and tasted the oath ring against the woman's skin. Iron doors. A cradle under ash. A dragon egg that had never hatched. Selka spoke the first taste aloud. You swore to feed from the prince's fire before he could speak. Vera screamed. Her oath ring cracked. A ribbon of stolen flame burst from the ring and flew toward Raethan's dragon shadow. The beast inhaled it with a sound like a coal finding air. Its eyes brightened. Raethan staggered as if the returned fire had struck his own ribs. Soren's face darkened. Silence her! Another noble reached for Selka. Raethan moved this time, not with flame, but with steel. His sword flashed across the table edge, cutting through goblets and silver dishes, forcing the noble back. He did not kill. Not yet. Each oath needed a tongue before judgment could matter. Selka understood. He was giving her room. The egg whispered again. Not Selka this time. A name broken into ash. Mael. Raethan froze. Selka looked toward the alcove. Your mother. His expression closed like a gate. No. The black bone cup pulsed violently in his hand. Selka tasted grief flood the wine-stained air. Queen Mylira's scream in the nursery. A cracked egg. A newborn prince with dragonfire promised away. A mother doing the only thing she could with death at her bedside. She hid something in the egg, Selka whispered. Soren shouted, Do not let her reach it. That command told the whole hall where the truth lived. The dragon shadow surged toward the alcove, but chains of red oathlight burst from the 7 nobles' rings and hooked into its wings. The beast roared and crashed against the wall, pinned by the very houses that had fed from it. Raethan raised the black bone cup to smash it. Selka seized his wrist. No, break it wrong, and the oath returns to your blood. His face twisted with restraint. Then tell me how. She looked up at the egg, where the crack widened like an opening eye. I have to taste what your mother left. Raethan went still. The dragon shadow strained against the red chains. Soren's whisper cut across the hall like a knife wrapped in silk. If she tastes the queen's ash, Majesty, she will know why your mother died. Selka saw Raethan's pain before he hid it. Then the black egg split wider. A small fall of pale ash drifted from its heart into the air. It did not fall toward the king. It drifted toward Selka's open mouth. Raethan moved faster than the falling ash. His hand rose between Selka's mouth and the pale drift from the egg, not striking it aside, not crushing it, only blocking it with his palm as if a king could forbid a dead queen's last secret from entering the world. The ash touched his skin. Every flame in the hall of coals went out. Darkness struck so suddenly that nobles cried out and servants dropped trays against the stone. For one breath, the only light came from the red oath chains binding the dragon shadow's wings and the dull heartbeat of the black bone cup in Raethan's other hand. Then the ash on his palm began to burn white. Raethan did not flinch, but Selka saw the pain enter his jaw. The queen's ash was not harming him like poison. It was recognizing him. That made the pain deeper, more intimate, a wound left by love rather than treason. The dragon shadow lowered its head with a sound almost like mourning. Raethan stared at the white fire in his palm. My mother, he said. Not a question. Not a command. The words were too quiet for the hall, but Selka heard them as if he had spoken against her ear. Lord Soren's voice cut through the dark. Do not indulge this theater. The servant has cracked a relic, disturbed royal ash, and turned His Majesty's dragon against the court. These are death offenses. Raethan did not look at him. If you speak one more sentence before I ask for it, Lord Volk, I will have your tongue weighed against the cup you hid. Silence. Selka could not see Soren clearly in the gloom, but she tasted his fear. It was sharp and bright, like wine spilled over a blade. The queen's ash lifted from Raethan's palm again. This time, it did not drift toward Selka's mouth. It moved toward her burned hand. Raethan saw it and closed his fingers around the ash. White fire burst between his knuckles. His dragon shadow screamed. The red oath chains tightened. Selka reached for him before thought could stop her. Let it go. His eyes found hers in the darkness. You do not know what it will do. No. She looked at the white fire leaking through his fist. But she does. For the first time, the hard wall of his face cracked with something that might have been grief. Then he opened his hand. The ash flew to Selka's palm. It did not burn her skin. It dissolved into the silver blisters left by the oath poison and turned them white. Selka husped. The taste struck her without touching her tongue. Queen Maelira's last breath. Not sweet, not gentle. Smoke, blood, milk, and dragonfire forced through a dying body. The nursery returned around Selka in flashes, rain against obsidian glass, the newborn prince crying, Soren's cup above the cradle, 7 oath, rings glowing red, and the cracked black egg in the brazier. But now she tasted what had been hidden beneath the first vision. The queen had not screamed only in fear. She had answered. Maelira dragged herself from the blood-soaked sheets while Soren sealed the prince's fire to the noble houses. She reached the brazier, broke her own wedding ring with her teeth, and mixed the gold dust with ash from the cracked egg. Then she pressed the ash beneath her tongue and whispered an oath no cupbearer had heard. If they feed from my son's fire, let the fire remember hunger. If they bind his dragon, let ash keep the unbound spark. If no royal tongue can speak the truth, let an ash tongue taste it. Selka stuttered. Raethan caught her shoulders. His touch was careful, but his hands shook once before he mastered them. What did she do? Selka looked up at him, and the answer hurt because it was not clean enough to comfort him. She could not break the oath. Raethan's face closed. But she hid the part of your dragon they could not feed from. Selka swallowed against the white ash coating her throat. Not in the egg, in ash, in a taste only someone like me could carry. The hall stirred. Someone whispered, ash, tongue. This time, the word sounded less like insult. That made Soren move. He struck the golden tasting rod against the floor 3 times. The oath rings on the 7 nobles flared violently, and their red chains pulled the dragon shadow lower. Its wings slammed into the stone. Cracks raced up the dragon pillars. Enough, Soren said. His voice had lost its silk. She admits it. The queen placed royal fire in an ash-tongue line. The servant is not witness. She is a thief, bred for the theft. The court seized on the word thief with hungry relief. Selka felt it turn around her. Of course, they preferred that story. It made the dead queen foolish, the king endangered, and Selka criminal. It let the old houses remain victims instead of feeders. Raethan stepped in front of her. Selka caught his sleeve. Do not only protect me, she whispered. Make them taste the difference. His head turned slightly. How? She looked at the 7 nobles bound to the dragon shadow by red chains. Each oath ring pulsed with stolen flame. Each noble had eaten from the king for years and called it loyalty. The queen's ash burned beneath Selka's tongue now, waiting. If I speak your mother's oath, it will wake the unbound spark. Sort of impala. That was answer enough. Raethan saw it too. And what happens to you? Selka wanted to lie. She could not. Not with the queen's ash in her mouth. I do not know. His eyes darkened. That is not acceptable. Neither is letting them keep your dragon on a leash. The dragon's shadow groaned under the chains. Raethan's gaze moved from the beast to Selka. For one breath, the hall, the nobles, Soren, the poisoned feast, all of it fell behind the terrifying intimacy of his choice. He did not trust her fully. Not yet. She could feel that. But he trusted the lie less. Speak it, he said. Selka stepped around him. The white ash burned up her throat. Soren shouted for the guards. Raethan's sword left its sheath in a line of dark steel, stopping every man before he took one step. Selka opened her mouth. Queen Maelira's oath poured out in a voice that was not Selka's, and not entirely the queen's, but something made of both ash and blood. The black egg above the throne shattered. A white ember fell from its heart. It struck Selka's tongue. The hall of coals erupted in dragonfire. When the flames cleared, Raethan's dragon shadow was no longer chained to the wall. It stood behind Selka, and its fire burned in her mouth. White flame tasted like memory. Selka stood in the center of the hall of coals, with her hands clenched at her sides, her ash-dark tongue burning bright enough to light the faces of every noble who had spent years looking through her. Behind her, Raethan's dragon shadow had pulled free from the red oath chains and now filled the hall from pillar to pillar, wings half spread, golden eyes blazing over her shoulder. No one cheered. No one dared breathe. The court had wanted a poisoner, a kitchen witch, a cursed servant whose death could make the royal feast clean again. Instead, the dragon had chosen to stand behind her. Selka felt its heat against her back, vast and terrible, but it did not enter her. That mattered. It did not coil around her throat. It did not force her hand. Its fire burned in her mouth because Queen Mylira's ash had woken there, but the dragon itself remained its own. Not hers. Not anyone's. Lord Soren saw the distinction and hated it. "Majesty," he said, voice raw now. "Look carefully before she finishes stealing what is left of you." Raethan stood a few steps away, sword drawn, face lit by the white flame spilling from Selka's lips. His dragon shadow did not curl behind his throne anymore. It stood with Selka, and every noble in the hall could see it. That sight cut him. Selka saw it in the stillness of his mouth, in the way his hand tightened around the sword hilt. He was king enough not to flinch before his court, but not stone enough to feel nothing when his own dragon chose distance. She turned slightly toward him. The dragon shadow moved with her. Whispers rushed across the tables. "There, see? It follows her. Ash. Tong. Dragon. Thief." Selka's chest tightened. Raethan heard the whispers too. His eyes moved from the dragon shadow to Selka, and for one dangerous breath she feared suspicion would win. Not because he was cruel, but because grief made even honorable men reach for the nearest blade. His fire had been fed from since birth. His mother had died trying to save a spark. Now the girl accused of poisoning him stood with that spark on her tongue. Anyone could turn pain into accusation if given the right wound. Raethan stepped closer. The dragon shadow lowered its head between them, warning. Selka lifted one hand. "Not to the beast. To the king. It is not mine," she said. The white fire made her words ring through the hall. Raethan stopped. Selka forced herself to hold his gaze. "Your mother hid what they could not steal. It woke in my mouth because she made it answer ash, not blood. But I am not its master." Soren laughed once, sharp and ugly. "Convenient. The servant claims innocence while wearing royal fire like a crown." "It is not a crown." Selka turned toward him. The heat in her mouth sharpened. "It is a testimony." The word struck the black bone cup in Raethan's hand. The cup pulsed. The 7 nobles screamed as their oath rings tightened. Red cracks opened along each ring, and from inside them came thin streams of stolen dragonfire, not enough to free the beast fully, only enough to prove the theft still lived. Lady Verisome clawed at her finger. "Make her stop!" Soren lifted the golden tasting rod again, but his hand was bleeding now where the metal touched him. Selka tasted why. The rod was not gold all the way through. Beneath its polished shell lay dragon bone, carved from the same egg that had cracked in Raethan's nursery. A serving tool, the court had believed. A symbol of trust. In truth, a small knife used every feast to stir oaths into wine. She looked at Raethan. The rod. He understood before she finished. Soren stepped back. "Too late." Raethan moved with the cold speed of a king done pretending ceremony was harmless. His sword flashed, striking the tasting rod from Soren's hand. It spun across the floor and struck the foot of the throne. The dragon shadow roared. The rod split lengthwise. Inside was not solid bone. Inside was a rolled strip of infant skin, thin as parchment, marked with 7 house seals and 1 smear of royal blood. The hall recoiled. Raethan stared at it. Selka tasted the whole room curdle. Even Soren's allies looked away. For the first time, the high cupbearer had exposed something too ugly for polished language. Raethan's voice dropped until every candle bent toward him. "Whose skin?" Soren's lips parted. No answer came. Selka already knew. Her throat closed around the white flame. Raethan looked at her, and she wished he had not. She wished this truth had found any other mouth. "The piece was taken from you," she whispered. At birth. Silence. Then, the dragon shadow shrieked. The sound shattered every silver dish on the royal table. Raethan did not move. His face had gone empty in the way battlefields were empty after the last cry. The infant's skin lay curled on the stone, still bearing house seals like signatures on a wound. Soren recovered by becoming colder. Yes, he said, a small price. The court gasped. He turned, no longer pretending innocence. You all enjoyed peace. You all enjoyed a king whose dragonfire was measured instead of wild. The houses fed, and Blackspire did not burn itself to ash. Do not tremble now because you dislike the shape of the spoon. Raethan's sword rose. Selka felt the black bone cup pulse in his other hand. If he killed Soren while holding it, the oath might drink the death and seal itself deeper. She stepped between them. Raethan's eyes flared. Move. No. The dragon shadow growled behind her, but it did not threaten him. It sounded as if it agreed with both of them and suffered for it. Soren smiled slowly. There. The ash tongue commands even your rage. Selka ignored him and looked at Raethan. He wants blood near the cup. Raethan's jaw tightened. Soren's smile thinned. The king lowered the blade by a fraction. That fraction saved them. Selka turned toward the 7 nobles. The feast is not finished. Fear moved through the hall. She lifted the broken rod from the floor. The infant's skin contract curled around it like a dead white tongue. If this was used to feed from him at every royal meal, she said, then every course holds a witness. The dragon shadow lowered its massive head beside her palm. Raethan's voice was rough. What are you going to do? Selka looked at the long tables covered in untouched dishes, poisoned wine, cracked oath rings, and noble faces gone pale with the knowledge that the servant had learned how to read their feast. I am going to taste the menu they wrote in your blood. Soren shouted. If she tastes the 7th course, the king dies. Selka froze. Raethan turned slowly. Above the hall, behind the throne, the broken black egg began to drip white fire. And from inside the black bone cup, Queen Mylira's voice whispered, He is telling the truth. Queen Mylira's whisper moved through the black bone cup like breath through a coffin. He is telling the truth. The hall of coals fell into a silence, so deep Selka could hear the broken egg dripping white fire behind the throne. Raethan did not look at Soren. He looked at the cup, then at the long feast table, where 6 courses lay poisoned beneath gold glaze, herb crust, sugared wine, and ceremonial ash. The 7th course waited under a covered silver dome at the center of the royal table, untouched, ringed with black candles that had never been lit. No one had served it. No one had named it. That was why Selka had not tasted it yet. Soren's smile returned slowly, not triumphant, but relieved by cruelty. The servant wanted truth. Let her taste it. Let the court see whether ash can survive dragon heart. Raethan's grip tightened around his sword. What is the 7th course? Soren bowed. Tradition. Selka tasted the lie from across the hall. Not a full lie. Worse. A holy word hiding a knife. She stepped toward the covered dish. Raethan caught her arm. No. The word cracked like command, but his hand was careful around her burned skin. The dragon shadow lowered its great head above them, white flame still flickering in Selka's mouth, its golden eyes fixed on the 7th course with old animal dread. Selka looked up at Raethan. If I do not know what it is, I cannot break it. If you taste it and die, that knowledge serves him. I did not say I would die. You did not say you would live. There was anger in him now, but not the kind that fed Soren's trap. This anger had shape. It held fear at its center and refused to call itself anything softer. Selka could not afford to be moved by it. Not yet. She gently pulled her arm free. Then do not let me taste alone. His eyes narrowed. Explain. She looked at the dragon shadow. The first poison entered me because it wanted your fire. The dragon ate it from my hand before it could return to you. She swallowed, feeling white flame scrape her throat. If the 7th course is tied to your death, then I cannot be the only mouth in the room. Raethan understood halfway. His face hardened. No, the dragon shadow rumbled. Selka looked back at him. You asked for the truth. I did not ask you to use yourself as a cup. And I did not ask to be dragged from the kitchens as a poisoner. Her voice shook, but she kept it low. Yet here we are, Majesty. The title struck him colder than his name would have. She saw it. Good. Distance was safer than tenderness, while enemies were still holding knives. Lord Soren lifted one hand. The 7 nobles, with cracked oath rings, straightened as if pulled by invisible cords. Their eyes were wet with fear now, not loyalty. The feast had begun turning on its feeders. Enough delay, Soren said. If she is innocent, let the 7th course prove it. Raethan turned toward him. If she dies, you die after. Soren smiled. If she dies, your Majesty will have larger concerns. Selka reached the silver dome. The air around it tasted wrong. Not bitter, not sweet, not rotten. Empty. That frightened her more than poison. Every poison had a flavor. Every lie had a texture. This dish tasted like a mouth held open after the tongue had been removed. She lifted the dome. Inside was no meat, no fruit, no wine. Only a small bowl of clear broth, almost colorless, with a single black scale floating at its center. Raethan stopped breathing. The dragon shadow recoiled so violently, its wings struck 2 pillars. Soren's eyes glittered. The king's mercy, served only during the Feast of Coals. A symbolic course, of course. His Majesty drinks first, the houses drink after, unity through fire. Selka stared at the black scale. It was not symbolic. It was alive. The scale pulsed faintly, as if cut from the place where Raethan's dragon shadow met his heart. Queen Maelira's voice whispered again from the cup. The 7th course opens the return path. Selka understood then. The first 6 courses had tested the channels. Noble rings, tasting rod, blood, honey, oath, wine, cradle, bargain, queen's ash. But the 7th course would complete the circuit. If Raethan drank, the unbound spark awakened in Selka's mouth would be dragged through his blood, through the cup, through the rings, and into the old houses. If Selka tasted it alone, the broth would mistake her ash tongue for the return path and burn through her to reach him. Either way, Soren won. Unless the dragon chose a 3rd mouth. Selka lifted the bowl. Raethan stepped beside her at once. Do not. She looked at the dragon shadow. I am not going to drink it. The beast's eyes burned brighter. Selka dipped one finger into the clear broth. Pain shot up her arm so fast her knees nearly buckled. Raethan caught her around the waist, and this time she let him, because if she fell, the bowl would spill, and if it spilled, everyone near the royal table might become part of the oath. The black scale spun in the bowl. Selka tasted nothing, then everything. A newborn prince crying, a queen bleeding, a dragon egg cracking, 7 houses kneeling, Soren's voice whispering over and over. The fire must be civilized before it becomes king. Then deeper, beneath Soren, another taste. Raethan, not as king, not as weapon, a boy in a training yard, palms blistered, trying to summon flame, while tutors watched with hidden pity. A young prince pretending he did not hear nobles whisper that his dragon burned low. A king learning to rule with less fire than his blood promised, making cruelty look like control because gentleness invited tests. Selka's chest hurt. The broth was not only a death trigger, it was a lifetime of stolen becoming. She pulled her finger free. White flame burst from her mouth, and with it came a single word. Civilized. Raethan's face went utterly still. Soren went pale. The dragon shadow lowered its head until its muzzle hovered over the bowl. Selka held it up with both hands. Not to me, she whispered. Not to him. The dragon's golden eyes fixed on hers. To yourself. The dragon shadow opened its mouth. Soren screamed. Stop her! The 7 oath rings flared red. Raethan released Selka, only to step between her and the nobles. Sword raised, body still close enough that she felt the heat of him at her back. The dragon shadow drank from the bowl. Not the broth. The command, hidden inside it. Black lines tore out of the clear liquid, whipping into the dragon's jaws like snakes of ink. The dragon swallowed them and roared white fire across the ceiling. Every red oath ring cracked wider. But the black scale remained. It rose from the bowl and flew toward Raethan's heart. Selka dropped the bowl and caught the scale in her burned hand. The hall vanished. She stood inside Raethan's blood. And there, chained to the oldest ember of his dragonfire, was the final oath not written by Soren. Written by Raethan's dead father. Selka stood inside Raethan's blood and heard his heart trying not to burn. It was not a place of flesh as healers understood it. It was a hall of red-black fire, vast and pulsing, with rivers of ember running through veins like molten roads. Every beat shook the ground beneath her bare feet. Every breath of the king echoed overhead like a dragon sleeping behind a sealed door. The black scale lay in her burned palm. It was no longer small. Here, inside the blood, it had become a shard of living armor, engraved with words that moved whenever she tried to read them. A final oath. Note Soren's hand. Not the 7 houses. A king's hand. Raethan's father. Selka took one step forward, and the blood hall changed. She saw the nursery again, but not the moment of the first theft. This came later. Queen Malira was already dead. The newborn prince slept in a cradle watched by a dragon shadow too bright for an infant body, its wings filling half the room with white-black flame. Servants cowered in corners. Windows had cracked from heat. The cradle curtains had burned away without touching the child. King Valor Blackspire stood beside the cradle with ashes in his hair and grief on his face. Lord Soren, younger and smooth as polished wine, knelt before him with the black bone cup in both hands. The queen hid a spark, Soren said. If it wakes, the prince will not be ruled, not by tutors, not by counsel, not by blood. He will be dragon before he is man. Valor looked down at his son. The vision should have shown cruelty. It did not. That made it worse. Raethan's father was afraid. Afraid of the baby's fire. Afraid of a dead queen's last defiance. Afraid of the old houses abandoning the throne if the prince became too powerful to bargain with. Afraid, perhaps, that he had already failed as a husband and would fail as a king if he could not make his son safer to rule. Soren lifted the cup higher. The first oath lets the houses feed. The final oath will keep him alive if the hidden spark ever returns. And the cost? Valor asked. Soren's eyes lowered. Selka tasted the answer before he spoke. The prince's heart will become the lock. The vision darkened. Valor closed his eyes. For one breath, Selka thought he would refuse. Then the dead king placed his bleeding thumb against the black scale, cut from the infant dragon shadow, and whispered, "Let my son live contained, rather than die unbound." The oath burned into the scale. The baby prince cried, not loudly, as if something inside him had learned silence before language. Selka came back to the blood hall, with tears burning behind her eyes. The final oath was not made from hatred. It was made from fear wearing the face of love. That was why it had survived so long. Outside the blood, she heard the hall of coals roaring faintly, as if through deep water. Soren was shouting, nobles were screaming. The dragon shadow was beating its wings against the ceiling. Raethan's voice cut through them all, saying her name with a force that shook the ember floor beneath her. Selka. The black scale in her hand pulsed. The words, finally stilled enough to read. If the unbound spark returns, let the king's heart close. Let fire remain ruled. Let the dragon live only as much as the crown permits. Selka understood the death trigger. If Raethan took back the stolen fire now, his heart would lock around it. His dragon would be sealed inside him like a blade in a coffin. He might survive as king, perhaps even become stronger for a moment, but the first full use of his restored fire would stop his heart. Soren had prepared the 7th course not to kill him immediately. To make his freedom fatal, the blood hall trembled. A door of white flame opened ahead of her. Beyond it, Raethan stood as a boy in a training yard, palms blistered, trying again and again to call flame, while tutors watched with hidden relief when nothing strong came. He did not weep. He did not rage. He learned early to make disappointment look like discipline. Selka stepped toward him. The boy looked up. For a moment, his eyes were the same molten amber as the king's. "Does it come back?" he asked. The question undid her more than pain had. Selka knelt before him. "Yes. Do I become what they feared?" She wanted to say no. The ash in her mouth would not allow a pretty lie. "You become what you choose after you stop letting fear choose for you." The boy vanished. The blood hall cracked open. Selka was thrown back into the hall of coals with the black scale burning in her fist and white fire pouring from her mouth. Raethan had one arm around her before she struck the floor. His dragon shadow circled them both, furious and dimming, its stolen fire still trapped in the 7th course's broken path. "What did you see?" he demanded. His voice was harsh. His hand at her back, was not. Selka looked at him and hated what truth required. Your father wrote the final oath. The hall went silent. Raethan did not move. Soren smiled slowly, as if the wound had opened exactly where he wanted it. A father's mercy, Majesty. Not treason. Mercy. He contained what would have destroyed you. Raethan's face went empty. The black bone cup beat once in his hand. Selka caught his wrist before he could crush it. If you break it in grief, the oath closes. His eyes lowered to hers. For the first time, she saw not the Dragon King, not the dangerous ruler, but the boy who had asked whether his fire ever came back. How do I undo it? He asked. Soren answered before Selka could. You cannot. The final oath was written by royal blood and accepted by royal fear. Only the king can open his heart to the unbound spark. Raethan's jaw tightened. Then I will. Soren's smile sharpened. Selka felt the scale in her palm turn cold. He wants that, she whispered. Raethan stilled. She looked toward the seventh course, where the clear broth had turned black, and the remaining scale-shaped shadow spun inside it, like a waiting blade. If you open your heart while the old oath remains unnamed, she said, your dragon returns, and your heart becomes its cage. The dragon shadow lowered its massive head beside Raethan, its golden eye fixed on Selka. Then it breathed white fire across her burned hand, not to harm her, but to reveal the last line hidden on the scale. The final oath may be broken only by the tongue that can taste fear without obeying it. Every noble in the hall turned towards Selka. Soren's face went pale, and Raethan whispered, Ash-tongue. Ash-tongue. The word moved through the hall of coals differently this time. Not as insult, as sentence. Every noble who had once leaned away from Selka's trays now stared at her mouth as if it held a blade meant for royal throats. Every servant at the lower walls held still, their faces pale in the white fire leaking from her lips. The dragon shadow lowered its massive head until its horns nearly scraped the stone, and its golden eye remained fixed on Selka's burned hand, where the black scale had revealed the final line. The final oath may be broken only by the tongue that can taste fear without obeying it. Lord Soren Valk stepped back. Only one step. Enough. Selka saw the truth of his fear before she tasted it. His rings had stopped shining. The golden rod lay broken by the throne. The 7 nobles stood with cracked oath bands, no longer certain whether they were masters of the feast or meat upon its table. Raethan's hand remained around Selka's waist, steadying her, but he did not pull her behind him. That mattered more than any vow he could have spoken. He had learned quickly. Protection could become a cage if it forgot to ask where the protected person wished to stand. What must she do? Raethan asked. Soren laughed too fast. Nothing. The line is ceremonial. Ash tongues were kitchen superstition, used to frighten servants from stealing wine. Selka tasted the lie so sharply her eyes watered. No, she said. You hunted them. The hall went still. Soren's face hardened. White flame curled behind Selka's teeth. With it came old flavors. Ash cellars, burned letters, women biting through their own tongues before interrogation, children hidden under coal bins, with salt pressed beneath their lips to hide the taste of oath poison in their blood. Selka had thought her line was shame. It had been survival. You hunted every ash tongue because Queen Mylera left the unbound spark where only one of us could wake it, she said. Soren's voice turned low. And yet one remained in my kitchen. In your kitchen? Selka repeated softly. The words opened another taste. Not accident. Placement. She saw herself as a child, soot-faced and silent, being brought to Blackspire's lower kitchens after her mother died, coughing blood into a basin of cold water. A steward read a paper. A seal pressed into wax. Soren's seal. Selka had believed poverty had carried her here. No. She had been kept close to the cup, close to the feast, close enough to be blamed if the old oath ever cracked. Raethan felt her sway. Selka? Her name in his mouth steadied her more than she wanted. Soren lifted his chin. If I wished her dead, Majesty, she would have died years ago. Selka looked at him. You needed my tongue alive. The black bone cup beat once. A confession without words. Raethan's expression turned lethal. For what? Selka held up the scale. To finish what your father feared to finish. If the unbound spark ever woke, Soren needed an ash tongue to draw it out. Take the blame. and let the final oath close around your heart." The dragon shadow snarled. The 7 nobles began whispering to one another, panic breaking their polished faces. Soren spread his hands. "A servant makes stories from smoke because she cannot survive truth." "Then let the cup taste you," Selka said. The hall of coals froze. Soren's eyes flickered. Raethan saw it. "Bring him." 2 guards seized Soren's arms, but the high cupbearer did not struggle. That calm frightened Selka. Men like Soren always kept another door behind the wall. The guards dragged him to the broken royal table. The black bone cup sat among shattered silver and spilled wine, beating softly. Raethan placed it before him. "Taste," the king said. Soren smiled. "I am not ash-tongue." "No," Raethan said, "but you are cupbearer." The old title turned against him. Soren's smile faded. Selka lifted the black scale. The final oath was written by royal fear, but sealed by the one who taught that fear where to go. "Taste the cup you guarded." For the first time, Soren looked directly at her, not as a servant, not as an obstacle, but as a witness he had failed to erase. "You think tasting fear frees anyone?" he asked. "Fear built this kingdom. Fear kept dragonfire from burning the houses to bone. Fear taught kings to sit still." "No," Selka said. "Fear taught cowards to call a chain a throne." Raethan's eyes flashed. The cup opened. A red-black vapor rose from it and reached toward Soren's mouth. He clenched his jaw, but the 7 cracked oath rings flared. The houses he had fed for years were still tied to him. Their fear pulled his fear forward. The vapor entered him. Soren gagged. Selka tasted it through the scale. Not all fear was the same. Raethan's father had feared his son's fire. The old nobles had feared losing influence. But Soren's fear tasted older, colder, more personal. He feared a king who could not be managed. He feared dragonfire without a cupbearer's hand beneath it. He feared becoming ordinary. The black bone cup showed the hall a memory. Young Soren standing before Raethan's father, not advising restraint for the kingdom, but promising the old houses that he could make the prince's fire divisible. Every feast would be tribute. Every oath ring would be a small mouth. Every king after Raethan would be born already measured. The nobles recoiled. One of the 7, Lord Carvin whispered, "You said the fire would be shared only in crisis." Soren spat blood. "Fools. Power unused is power wasted." The final mask fell. Selka raised the scale to her tongue. Raethan caught her wrist, but gently. "If this hurts you," he said, voice rough, "tell me how to stop it." "You cannot stop it." His face closed. "But you can refuse to let it make me alone." Something changed in him then. Not softness, not surrender. A king learning that presence could be stronger than command. He released her wrist and stood beside her. Selka touched the scale to her ash-dark tongue. Fear flooded her mouth. Valor's fear, Soren's fear, the 7 houses' fear, the court's fear, Raethan's own buried fear that full fire might make him the monster they had prepared him to become. Selka did not swallow it. She named it. Fear of an unbound king. The scale cracked. She named the next taste. Fear of a dragon who chooses. The dragon shadow roared. The black bone cup split from rim to stem. Selka's knees nearly buckled, but Raethan's hands steadied her back, open and careful. One final taste remained, bitterest of all. Selka looked at Soren. Fear of a servant telling the truth. The cup shattered. White fire exploded outward, breaking every oath ring in the hall of coals. Soren screamed as stolen dragonfire ripped from his blood and flew back toward Raethan's dragon shadow. The beast rose behind Selka, no longer dim, no longer chained, its wings unfolding in a blaze of white and black flame. But the final oath was not finished. The broken scale turned into a shard of fire and flew toward Raethan's heart. Selka lunged. The dragon shadow lunged with her. Raethan did not move away. He opened his chest to the spark, and the oath entered him like a knife of light. The oath entered Raethan's heart like a knife made from his father's fear. For one breath, the Dragon King did not move. Then all the fire in the hall of coals bent toward him. White flame from the shattered cup, red flame from the broken oath rings, black flame from the old dragon bones above the throne. Every stolen spark the houses had fed upon for years rushed back to its source, and Raethan's body became the doorway they had been waiting to close. Selka saw the final oath tighten, not around his throat, around his heart. Let the king's heart close. Let fire remain ruled. Let the dragon live only as much as the crown permits. Raethan dropped to one knee. His dragon shadow roared behind Selka, enormous and radiant now, but the sound split with pain. It could not enter him fully. The oath had turned Raethan's own heart into a locked gate, and the returning fire slammed against it with nowhere to go. Soren laughed through blood on the floor. There, he gasped. A king may recover his fire, but he cannot survive it. That was always the mercy. Raethan pressed one hand to his chest. Flame crawled between his fingers. His face was pale, controlled, and terrible. Selka, he said. Not command. Warning. He did not want her near the fire. Selka stepped closer anyway. The dragon shadow lowered its wing between her and Raethan, not to block her, but to shield her from the worst of the heat. Its golden eye fixed on her mouth, waiting. She understood then. The final oath had entered Raethan because it was written in royal blood, but it could only be broken by the tongue that could taste fear without obeying it. Not by swallowing the oath for him, not by dying prettily before the court, by naming the fear still hiding inside his heart. Selka knelt before the Dragon King. The hall watched in stunned silence as the accused servant placed her burned hand over his. His skin was hotter than forge iron. Pain flashed up her arm, but she did not pull away. Raethan's eyes opened. Do not take it into yourself, he rasped. I am not a cup. The words shook, but they held. Behind her, the dragon shadow breathed once, and white fire lit the space between them. Selka leaned close enough to taste the oath rising from Raethan's breath. It was bitter, ancient, and intimate. A father's fear, a court's leash, a child's loneliness, a king's buried terror that if his dragon returned whole, every cruel thing they had warned about him might become true. She named the first taste, fear of burning what you love. Raethan flinched. The oath cracked once. Selka named the second, fear that your mother died, saving a monster. The dragon shadow gave a wounded growl. Raethan's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. She named the third, softer than the others because it hurt more. Fear that if your fire is finally yours, your choices will be yours too. The final oath screamed. The flame around Raethan's heart turned white. Soren dragged himself forward, face twisted. Silence her. If she breaks it, no house will hold him. No council will measure him. You will all kneel to dragonfire without a chain. Raethan turned his head toward the court. The nobles looked away, some from shame, some from fear, some because they had enjoyed the chain until the servant named it. Selka kept her hand over Raethan's. Choose. His eyes returned to hers. For the first time that night, the Dragon King looked less like a throne and more like a man standing at the edge of himself. If I open to it, he said, I may not be gentle. No, Selka said, but gentleness forced by poison is not virtue. His breath caught. The dragon shadow lowered its head until its muzzle nearly touched his shoulder. Raethan closed his eyes. Then he opened his hand over his heart. Not to contain the fire, to let it pass. The oath shattered. White dragonfire burst through the hall of coals in a circle so bright every noble cried out and covered their faces. It did not burn the servants. It did not touch Selka. It struck the 7 old houses first, tearing stolen flame from their rings, their blood, their feast vows, their hidden ledgers. Each stolen spark flew back to the dragon shadow, and with every return, the beast grew more solid, more radiant, more alive. Soren screamed as the fire reached him, not because it burned flesh, because it burned titles. High cupbearer, guardian of the royal table, keeper of the feast, loyal servant of Blackspire. All those polished names fell away. What remained was a man who had built a kingdom of measured theft and called it restraint. The dragon shadow opened its jaws above him. Raethan rose slowly. His fire had returned. Not wild, not tame. His. Do not kill him, Selka said. The court stared at her. Even Raethan looked surprised. Selka stood, trembling. Death makes him brief. Let every house taste what he poured. Raethan's chaza held hers. Then he lowered his hand. The dragon shadow obeyed. Not because it was chained, because it chose him. Raethan turned to Soren. You will live long enough to drink from every cup you served in my name. Every oath poison, every stolen vow, every lie hidden in blood. And when your tongue blackens, my court will hear what you protected." Soren shook his head, horror finally breaking him. "Majesty, you do not speak to me as cupbearer." Raethan's voice filled the hall. "You speak as poison." The dragon shadow breathed white fire over Soren's signet rings. They melted into bands of ash around his wrists, binding him without chains. The 7 nobles fell to their knees. Raethan looked at them, and this time his eyes burned with the full force of a dragon no cup had measured. "Each house that fed from my fire will open its vaults. Every servant accused under oath, poison law will be named again. Every kitchen girl, cup boy, ash carrier, and poison taster condemned by convenience will be answered for." Silence. Then, from the lower wall, one servant began to weep. Selka did not know why that sound nearly undid her. Perhaps because no one had wept for ash tongues before. Raethan turned to her. The court watched closely, ready to turn even gratitude into possession. He did not reach for her at once. He bowed, not deeply, not theatrically, but enough that the Dragon King's head lowered before the servant they had dragged in to die. "You kept my fire alive," he said. Selka's throat tightened around the fading white flame. "Your mother did that first, and you gave it back without claiming it." His dragon shadow lowered its massive head beside her hand, the same hand from which it had eaten poison before the whole court. This time, it did not feed. It rested its burning muzzle against her palm. A sound moved through the hall. Shock, fear, awe, anger. Selka felt all of it and did not step back. Raethan offered his hand, not to lift her above the court, not to pull her behind him. Beside him, "Come with me to the old records," he said, not as accused, not as servant bound to silence, as the only witness in this hall whose tongue told the truth. Selka looked at the shattered feast, the broken cup, the melted rings, the nobles on their knees, and Soren bound in ash. All her life, survival had meant swallowing poison and staying useful. Tonight, she had spoken it back. She placed her burned hand in Raethan's. The dragonfire in her mouth dimmed to an ember, no longer consuming her, only warm beneath her tongue. Together, they turned from the poisoned feast. Behind them, the hall of coals filled with the sound of old oaths cracking open, one by one, and for the first time since his birth, the Dragon King's shadow burned whole.